Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting: if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. The Time of Reckoning. Episode 3. Chapter 16 to 22. About 50 feet into the forest, Simon stopped dead and swore. "What?" I said. He waved at the woods. "I should have checked with you. Is it okay being out here?" I assured him it was fine. "Derek warned me the woods made you nervous, that you were worried about raising dead animals." He glanced at me. "And you weren't even thinking about that until I brought it up, were you?" He cursed again, more imaginatively now. "It's okay," I said. "As long as I don't summon or fall asleep, I'll be fine. And if you do fall asleep, I need some serious work on my conversation skills." We walked a little farther. "Speaking of conversation, how, he made a face. "Sorry, I'm a bit nervous." "Did you have a lesson with Andrew today?" A dramatic whoosh of relief. "Thank you." "Yes, I did." "Boring, boring, boring." No sudden surge of power for me. "I'm just a regular." He paused. "Okay, that was incredibly insensitive. Did I mention I'm nervous? I should be happy to have normal powers. And I am. But still, it must be annoying, seeing Tori casting new spells right away when you've been training for years." "Yet. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't Tori." "So what spells can you do?" "Nothing useful. You need to master the basics first." "I get that, but right now, all I care about are spells that will help us, and perfecting my fog spell isn't going to do that." "That knockback one is good." He shrugged. "Maybe Andrew can teach you the binding spell Tori casts." He shook his head. "It's witch magic. That's different." "Do you want the quick answer or a lesson on the spellcaster races?" "Option 2 please." He smiled, hand tightening around mine. "There are 2 major spellcasting races. Sorcerers are male and have sons, all of them sorcerers. Witches are female, same deal, but with daughters. Sorcerer magic uses hand gestures along with incantations, mostly in Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. And, no, I don't speak Greek, Latin, or Hebrew. I can just recite the spells. Knowing the languages would help, but memorizing spells is tough enough right now. Sorcerer magic is offensive, used to attack. Witches use the same languages for incantations, but they get to skip the hand gestures. Their magic is defensive, used to stop an attack. Or escape one, which would be useful these days. You can't learn witch magic. We can, with a whole lot of effort, because it's not our natural kind. Right now, I need to stick to my own, though I'd like to learn a few witch spells someday. Just not from Tori." When we reached the service station, Simon bought the ice cream, then we went back out to a log and sat down. "I would have been fine with a single scoop," I said. "Too bad. But I've been diabetic as long as I can remember, Chloe. I've never had double scoop ice creams, so I don't miss them. If it bothered me, I'd never eat with Derek, would I? And since I'll be done first, I can give you a spell demonstration as snack time entertainment." He did that, goofing around and making me laugh. Then we walked back, holding hands and talking some more. It was getting dark. When we could see the lights of the house through the trees, he stopped and tugged me in front of him. My heart hammered in what I told myself was anticipation, but felt more like terror. "Was it okay?" he asked. I smiled. "Better than okay." So I won my pass to date too. You did. Good. His face lowered toward mine and I knew what was coming. I knew it. But when his lips touched mine, I still jumped. Sorry, I. Skittish as a cat, he murmured. His hand slid to the back of my neck and he tilted my face up. If I'm moving too fast. And no. Good. This time, I didn't jump. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I didn't do anything. Simon kissed me and I just stood there, like someone had cut the cord between my brain and my muscles. Finally, the connection caught and I did kiss him, but awkwardly, some part of me still holding back, my gut twisting, like I was doing something wrong, making a huge mistake, and Simon stopped. For a moment, he hovered there, face above mine, until I had to look away. Wrong guy, hey, he said, his voice so soft I barely caught it. What? He eased back, and his eyes went blank, unreadable. There's someone else, he said. Not a question. A statement. Someone? A boyfriend, you mean? From before? No. Never. I wouldn't. Go out with me if there was. I know. He took another step back, the heat of his body fading, the chill of night air moving in. I don't mean a guy from before, Chloe. I mean one from now. I stared at him. Now? Who else? There was only one other guy. Derek? Why you think? I couldn't finish. I wanted to laugh. You think I like Derek? Are you kidding? But the laugh wouldn't come, just this thundering in my ears, breath catching like I'd been smacked in the chest. Derek and I aren't. No, not yet. I know. I don't. Just say it. Please let me say it. I don't like Derek. But I didn't. Couldn't. Simon jammed his hands into his pockets and we stood there in that awful silence until I managed to say, it isn't like that. It wasn't. Not at first. He stared out at the woods. It started to change after the crawl space. You guys hanging out together, vibe changing. I told myself I was just imagining it. When you and Tori escaped from the lab, it seemed like I was right. But then, after the truck stop, when you guys came back, he went quiet, then looked over at me. I'm right, aren't I? There was a note of pleading in his voice. Tell me I'm wrong, Chloe. Please. And everything in me wanted to say it. This was Simon. Everything I'd ever dreamed of in a boyfriend, and here he was, mine for the taking. I only had to say the words, and I tried. I tried. But all I could manage was another week. It's not like that. Yeah, it is. He started to walk away, back in the direction we'd come. Then he stopped and, without turning, he reached into his jacket and held out a rolled-up paper, murmuring, "This is for you." I took it, and he continued walking. Fingers shaking, I unrolled the paper. It was the picture he'd drawn of me, now colored. It looked even better than it had in the sketch. I looked better. Confident and strong and beautiful. The picture blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I quickly re-rolled it before I ruined it. I took a few steps after him and called out. I could see his figure in the distance, still walking, and I knew he heard me, but he didn't stop. 17. I watched Simon walk away, then wiped my eyes with my sleeve and headed for the lights of the house. I'd just passed the edge of the woods when the rear door opened, light spilling into the nearly dark yard. Then a hulking figure blocked the light. No, I whispered. Not now. Just go back inside. The door slapped shut, sound echoing as Derek marched across the yard, dead on target. I looked around, desperate for an escape route, but there was none. Go forward and deal with Derek, or run back toward Simon and have to deal with both of them. I kept walking. Where's Simon? He snapped. Relief washed through me. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just pointed back to the woods. He left you? Out here? At night? He dropped something, I mumbled, trying to get past him. He isn't far. Without a sound, he was right in front of me, blocking my path. You're crying, he said. No, I tore my gaze away. Just dust. From the path. Simon's that way. I tried to pass him, but he stooped, trying to get a look at my face. When I wouldn't let him, he caught my chin. I jerked back, flinching at his touch, heart thudding at it, too. I told myself Simon was wrong. I'd never be dumb enough to fall for Derek. But I had. With him so close, my stomach kept doing weird little flips. It wasn't fear. It hadn't been fear for a while. You have been crying, he said, voice softer. Then his breath caught, the growl coming back as he snapped, what did Simon? He bit off the words, cheeks reddening like he was embarrassed even to think Simon might be responsible. What happened? He said. Nothing. It just didn't work out. Didn't work out. He spoke slowly, like he was processing a foreign language. Why? Talk to Simon. I'm talking to you. What did you do to him? I stiffened. Only he was right. I had done something to Simon. I'd hurt him. And for what? Some stupid crush on a guy who barely tolerated me most of the time? Was that the kind of girl I was? Pick the jerk over the nice guy? I screwed up. Again. You're shocked, I'm sure. Now, let me go inside. He blocked me. What did you do, Chloe? I sidestepped. He sidestepped. You like him, don't you? He said. Yes, I like him. Just not. Not what? Talk to Simon. He's the one who thinks. Thinks what? Step. Block. Thinks what? That there's someone else, I blurted before I could stop myself. I took a deep, shuddering breath. He thinks there's someone else. Who? I was going to say I don't know. Some guy from school, I guess. But Derek's expression said he already knew the answer. The look on his face, it'd been humiliating before, having Simon accuse me of liking Derek, but that was nothing compared to how I felt when I saw Derek's look. Not just surprise, but shock. Shock and horror. Me, he said. Simon said he thinks you and I are. No, not that. He knows we aren't. Good. So what does he think? That I like you. Again, the words flew out before I could stop them. This time, I didn't care. I'd completely humiliated myself, and now I was just empty and ashamed. All I wanted was to get him out of my way, and if telling him that made him run in terror, then good. But he didn't run. He just stared at me, and that was worse. I felt like the biggest loser at school, admitting to the coolest guy that she liked him. He stood there gaping like he must have heard me wrong. I don't, I said quickly. Those words came easily now, because at that moment, they were true. I don't, I said again, when he just kept staring. You'd better not. His voice was a low rumble, the scowl settling into place as he finally eased back. "You'd better not, Chloe, because Simon likes you." "I know. Simon's had girls calling him every day since he was 12. They follow him at school. They even talk to me, trying to get to him. Cute girls. Popular girls. So I should be thrilled that a guy like him even looked my way, right?" "Course not. I didn't mean." "Oh, I know what you meant. I should count my blessings that I happened to be around when his choices were, well, none, really, because otherwise I'd never have stood a chance." "That's not I never said." "Whatever." I wheeled and headed the other way. He cut me off. "Simon likes you, Chloe." "Yeah, he's dated a lot of girls. But he really likes you, and I thought you liked him back." "I do. Just not like that, I guess." "Then you shouldn't have let him think it was like that." "You think I led him on? For what? Kicks? I don't have enough excitement in my life, so maybe I'll tease a nice guy, get his hopes up, then laugh and skip away?" How could I know how I felt until we went out and I stopped? I couldn't win this fight. No matter what I said, I'd still be the evil who'd hurt his brother. I turned and started walking along the edge of the woods. "Where are you going?" he called. "You won't let me go into the house." "I'm sure Simon doesn't want me around him either. So it seems like I'm going to take a moonlight stroll in the forest." "Oh, no, you're not." He jumped in front of me. "You can't go wandering around alone at night. It's not safe." I looked up at him. His green eyes glittered in the dark, reflecting the moonlight like a cat's. His scowl had vanished. The defiance was gone, too, replaced by a tightness around the mouth, a worry that clouded his eyes, and seeing that quicksilver change, I wanted to. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Kick him in the shins seemed like a good option. Unfortunately, bursting into tears seemed more likely, because here lay the root of the problem, the contradiction in Derek that I couldn't seem to work out, no matter how hard I tried. 1 second he was in my face, making me feel stupid and useless. The next he was like this, hovering, concerned, worried. I told myself it was just his wolf instinct, that he had to protect me whether he wanted to or not, but when he looked like this, like he'd pushed me too far and regretted it, that look said he genuinely cared. I turned toward the woods and resumed walking. "I'll be careful. No dead will rise tonight. Go back inside, Derek." "You think that's all I'm worried about?" The Edison Group could be camped out there right now, waiting for us to venture into the deep, dark woods. If you believed that, you'd never have let Simon go out. I didn't like it. But he promised you'd be back before dark, which is why I was at the door, getting ready to come find you too. He caught my arm, quickly releasing it and grabbing my sleeve instead. "Just..." He stopped. I turned to see him staring into the forest, chin lifted, nostrils flared, face tense. "Don't pull that," I said. "Pull what?" "Pretending you smell something out there." "Someone?" "No," I thought he inhaled again, then shook his head sharply. "Nothing, I guess. Just..." He rubbed the back of his neck, wincing slightly, and I noticed the sheen of sweat on his face, shimmering in the moonlight. His eyes glowed brighter than usual. Fever bright. The change was coming. "Not now. Please, not now. That's the last thing I need to deal with." He released my sleeve. "Fine, take a walk." I set out, staying in the yard. I wasn't foolish enough to march into the woods to spite him. I'd gone about 20 feet when I glanced around to see where he'd gone. He was 5 paces behind, following soundlessly. "Derek," I sighed. "I need some fresh air." "Go on." Another 20 feet. He kept following me. I turned and glowered up at him. He stopped and stood there, face impassive. "Fine," I said. "I'll go in the house. You can track down Simon before the Edison group snatches him." He followed me to the door, then waited as I went in before heading out to round up his brother. 18. Tori was in our room, reading an old leather-bound book from the library downstairs. "So, how was the big ice cream date?" she asked, without looking up. "Okay." She lowered the book. I quickly looked away and opened a bag that was sitting on my bed. "Oh, that's your new clothes," she said. "Margaret bought them." Apparently Gwen wanted to, but the old bat insisted. "Pay back for this morning, I think. It was bargain store stuff. From the children's department. At least it was for girls, unlike the ugly boys' sweatshirts Derek had bought me." Still, I unwrapped the pajamas. Pink flannel covered in rainbows and unicorns. "Hey, you think that's bad?" Tori said. She shopped in ladies' wear for me, and got a granny nightgown with lace. "Lace? I'd trade you if those would fit me." A thump, as she tossed the book onto the floor. "So how'd the date go?" "It didn't." She hesitated. "Well, love to say I'm surprised, but don't forget, I'm the girl who was crazy about Simon until she was forced to spend 24 hours alone with him. That cured me, fast." "Simon's fine." "Sure, he is. Or he will be when he grows up a little. He's fine. It was me. I screwed up. I didn't continue. I could only imagine Tori's reaction if I said I might have a crush on Derek. I'd lose every ounce of her respect I'd earned. I wished I could talk to someone, though. A girl with more dating experience, preferably one who wouldn't think I was a complete loser for liking Derek. Ray would be good. She didn't care for either of the guys, but she'd listen and give advice. Liz would be even better, always helpful, never judging. As for my school friends, it was like they belonged to another life, friends of another Chloe. "Were you crying?" Tori peered at my face. "You were." It's nothing." Simon pulled something, didn't he? Got you out on that walk, and the next thing you know, it's not your hand he's holding." Her eyes blazed. "Guys. They can be such." "It wasn't like that. If he pulled that crap, you can tell me. I've had a few surprise first dates myself. Wish I'd had my spells then. Especially the binding one. It wasn't like that." I met her gaze. "Really? Simon was fine." She eyed me. "You sure? The only thing he did was kiss me, and he asked first." "He was fine." I froze up. "Ah." She settled onto my bed. "First kiss? And no. Of course not. You know, it's hard to lie convincingly when you stutter, Chloe. So it was your first kiss. Big deal. My first one was last year, and I made him wait until the third date. I don't let a guy push me into anything I'm not ready for. They think because I'm popular I must put out. I don't, and by the end of the first date, they know it." She reclined on the bed. "So he kissed you and you froze up, and he thought that meant you weren't into him." "It happens. He should have expected that everyone knows how jumpy you are." I glared at her. Well, it's true. Just tell him he surprised you, and ask him out. Try again. And what if I didn't want to try again? I finished gathering up my stuff. You're getting the room to yourself tonight. She sat up. What? I'm going to sleep in the next one. I'm not really good company. I could see that hurt her feelings. I was getting good at that. At the door I paused. Thanks. For everything today. I appreciate it. She nodded and I left. I should have stayed with Tori. Being alone meant I had nothing to do except curl up under the covers and cry about how horribly wrong my life had gone, then despise myself for wallowing in self-pity. I'd screwed up everything. I couldn't control my powers, even when our future depended on it. No one was talking about freeing Ray and Aunt Lauren and finding the guy's dad anymore. We'd be lucky if my cemetery summoning didn't turn us into prisoners. The only people I could count on were Derek, Simon, and Tori. After they'd all apparently forgiven me for my cemetery screw-up, now I'd hurt Simon, Derek, and rebuffed Tori. I wanted to go home. If I had real guts, I'd pack my bag and leave before I made things worse. I couldn't even manage that, though. I hated myself for being so weak. I couldn't seem to do anything but cry until at last I fell into an exhausted sleep. A rap on the door woke me. I squinted at the nightstand, looking for the clock, only to remember that I'd changed rooms. Chloe? It's me. After a pause, he added, Derek, like I could mistake that deep rumble for anyone else, like I could mistake that little part of me that perked up like an eager puppy saying, it's him. Quick! Go see what he wants. God, how had I been so blind? It seemed so obvious now. Sad and pathetic. Par for the course these days. I pulled the covers up and closed my eyes. Chloe. The floorboards creaked. I need to talk to you. I didn't answer. Another creak, this time the door itself, and I shot up in bed as he slipped in. Hey! I said. You can't. Sorry, he mumbled. It's just. He moved into the moonlight. That was no accident. He wanted me to see his eyes burning with fever, his skin flushed, hair sweat-soaked. He wanted me to say, oh, you're changing, leap out of bed, and insist on going outside with him, help him through it, as I had the last 2 times. I looked at him and I lay back down. He stepped forward. Chloe. What? It's starting again. I see that. I sat up, swung my legs out of bed, and stood. He breathed a sigh of relief. I walked to the window. Head down that path about 30 feet, and you'll find a clearing to the left. That should be a good place. A spark of panic ignited in his eyes. After how he'd treated me today, I should have said good. But I didn't. Couldn't. It took everything I had just to crawl back into bed. Chloe. What? He scratched his arm. Scratched hard as the skin bubbled, his muscles writhing. He glanced at me, and the look in his eyes was so miserable that I had to clamp my jaw shut against the impulse to say, fine, I'll come with you. What? I said instead. He swallowed. Licked his lips. Tried again. Even asking me to come with him was too much. He'd never had to before. I need. He swallowed again. I want, will you come with me? I lifted my gaze to his. How can you even ask me that? How many times did you chew me out today? Make me feel like everything's going wrong and it's all my fault. His eyes widened in genuine surprise. That's not what I meant. He brushed his sweaty bangs back. If I hurt you, how could you not hurt me? This morning, after the cemetery, I needed your help. Your advice. All you could do was make me feel worse than I already did, which, believe me, wasn't easy. Then tonight, with Simon, you acted like that was all my fault, too, even when you could see how upset I was, how bad I felt. I took a deep breath. After the truck stop, after our trip back, I thought we were friends. We are. No, I met his gaze. Obviously we're not. The look on his face, confused and miserable, made me feel awful, which only made me madder. He had no right to come in here and expect help, then make me feel guilty for refusing. Chloe, please. He rubbed his hand over his throat. The veins and tendons pulsed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. It's coming faster this time. Then you should go. I see. He swallowed hard and looked at me, fever making his eyes so bright they seemed to glow. Please. It wasn't the please that did it. It was the absolute panic in his eyes. He was terrified of the change, of not knowing whether he could complete it, if the genetic modification had done something to him, and that's why he kept suffering through this, only to fail before he reached the end. He'd never actually said that, and maybe I'm a pushover, but I couldn't send him off to do it alone. So I grabbed my jacket and sneakers. Thank why he began. I brushed past him to the door. Let's go. 19. We kept to the shadows in the yard in case anyone looked out and saw us heading for the forest. Once we reached the path, Derek stayed beside me, sneaking glances my way, giving me that dejected look that only made me madder, because I didn't want to feel guilty, yet I did. I wanted to set this aside and get back to normal. But when he looked at me, I had only to think of that other look, the horrified one when I said Simon thought I liked Derek, and that shut down any impulse to make up. You wanted to talk about what happened at the cemetery, he said finally. I didn't answer. We should talk, he said. I shook my head. We picked our way along the path. I tried to hang back, letting him take the lead with his better night vision, but he stayed at my side. About the other day, when I yelled at you for summoning without your necklace, he said. It's fine. Yeah, but, I just wanted to say that testing without it is a good idea. We should try. I turned to him. Don't do this, Derek. Do what? I'm coming along for your change, so you feel obligated to help me in return. He scratched hard at his arm. I don't. Yes, you do. Now, let's find a place before you start changing in the middle of the path. He kept scratching, blood welling up in lines down his arm. I just want to. I caught his hand. You're making yourself bleed. He stared down, struggling to focus. Oh. Come on. I turned off the path, heading for the clearing I'd spotted earlier. I heard what Andrew said this morning, he said. About me. I figured you did, I said, softer than I meant to, then cleared my throat, trying to find the anger again. He's got a point. I'm not. You're fine. Andrews, I snapped. Great. I'd found the anger and sent it in the wrong direction. He's wrong, okay? You know that. Let's just drop it. When I blew up at you about the cemetery, I didn't mean to. I'm frustrated and Please, I said, wheeling on him. Just stop, okay? He did, for about 5 paces. I was frustrated with the situation. Being stuck here. The change coming on makes it worse. I know that's not an excuse. I glanced up at him. He watched me, expectant. He wanted me to say maybe it did explain things. Cut him some slack. The problem was that I wanted to. And if I did, then the next time he felt like venting on me, he would. Chloe. I stopped at the edge of a small clearing. Is this okay? He said nothing and I thought he was checking it out, but when I turned, he'd gone still, his chin up, staring into the forest. Did you hear that? What? He shook his head. Nothing, I guess. He stepped into the clearing and looked around, murmuring, "Good, good." Then he stripped off his sweatshirt and set it on the ground. You can sit here. He glanced over at me. Remember the other night at Andrew's? When you came out to keep me company, and we tried doing some training with you. We should do that again. I sighed. You aren't going to quit, are you? You think if you can just say the right thing, it'll all be okay. His lips twitched in something like a smile. I can hope, can't I? Sure. And if it works, what does that make me? You get to treat me any way you want, and as soon as you decide to play nice, all is forgiven. I am sorry, Chloe. For now. I turned away. Forget it, okay? Let's just. He caught my elbow. His skin burned even through my jacket. I mean it. I'm really sorry. When I get mad like that, it's not. He released my arm and rubbed the back of his neck. Rivulets of sweat ran down his face. The skin on his bare arms rippled. You need to get ready. No. I need to say something. Just give me a section. He took a second. Then another. Then another, just standing there, rubbing his arm furiously, gaze fixed on that. Derek, you need. I'm fine. Just give me. He took a deep breath. Derek. Just 1 second. He started scratching again. When I moved forward to grab his hand, he stopped. Right, he murmured. He flexed his hand, then made a fist, as if to keep himself from scratching. I tell you not to be scared of me. I snap at you when you back away. But sometimes. He reached around to scratch his shoulders, wincing as his nails dug in. Derek, you have to. Sometimes that's exactly what I want, he said. That's what I'm trying to do, scare you off. So you don't accidentally hurt me. I sighed. You aren't going to. No, it's not that. It's. His hand went to his forearm, then he stopped short as dark stubble sprouted. You're changing, Derek. We'll talk later. Right. Yeah. Later. Good. The words rushed out in a whoosh of relief. He looked around, blinking as sweat streamed into his eyes. You need to get down, I said gently. When he still didn't budge, I caught his hand and tugged. He lowered himself with some difficulty, then got up on all fours, in position to begin the change. Unless Margaret brought you a lot of new shirts, you might want to take that one off, I said. Right. He pulled at the hem, tugging it up, but his arm wouldn't twist the right way to get the shirt up over his head, like his joints were already repositioning, fusing. So I helped. I drew the line at removing his pants, though. Luckily, he'd pulled on sweats to sleep in, and he was able to fumble them down to his knees, and I was okay with taking it from there. His shorts were staying on. If they ripped during the change, I just hoped the transformation was far enough along that, well, whatever. He barely had his clothes off before the full body spasms hit, his back shooting up, his spine bending at a seemingly impossible angle, wrenching a gurgling whimper from him as his face contorted in agony, the cry cut short as he spewed dinner into the bushes. It went on like that for a while. The spasms, the convulsions, his skin and muscles rippling like something out of a horror movie. The gasps and moans and stifled cries of pain between retching and dry heaves. The stink of vomit and sweat. You'd really think this would cure any romantic notions I had about the guy. But I'd seen it 3 times now, and I watched every time, knowing if I looked away, moved away, let him think I was horrified and disgusted, I'd only make it worse. I wasn't horrified and disgusted. What I saw wasn't some guy puking and grotesquely contorting. I saw Derek, in unbelievable agony and scared out of his mind. It took only that first awful spasm to chase away the last of my anger. There would be time for that later. Instead, I knelt beside him, rubbing his shoulders, telling him he'd be okay, he was doing fine, just keep going. Finally, the retching stopped and he crouched there, head down, hair hanging, hiding his face, his body covered in short, black hair, his shoulder muscles hunched, arms and legs straight, claw-like fingers half buried in the earth. He panted, drawing deep, ragged breaths. "You're getting there," I said. "It's coming faster this time." True or not, it didn't matter, only that he accepted it, nodding and relaxing a little. Another spasm hit. His body convulsed in wave after wave. His legs and arms kept changing, thinning and shortening, his hands and feet doing the same. The hair on his head retracted as the hair on his body lengthened from stubble to thick fur. As for his face, I knew that was changing too, but he'd averted it. His body continued spasming until he had to stop again, heaving as he struggled for breath. I rubbed his back and he leaned against me. I could feel his muscles trembling, like he could barely hold himself up on all fours. I moved closer, letting him rest against me, my head on his shoulder, feeling his heart beating hard and fast as his shudders gradually slowed. "You're almost there. Keep going. You're going to finish this time. Just..." He tensed. Then his back flew up, knocking me aside. His body went rigid, head still down, back lifting higher and higher, like someone was pulling it up, head sinking lower still, black fur gleaming in the moonlight. Bones crackled. Derek gave a deep moan that made me move closer again, rubbing his back, telling him it would be okay. Then, with a final shudder, it was. He lifted his head, turned to look at me, and he was a wolf. 20. The last time Derek had tried to change, he'd made me promise to go someplace safe as soon as he seemed close to finishing. When I saw that wolf in front of me, a lead weight dropped in my gut telling me I should have taken his advice. But as soon as his eyes met mine, the dread evaporated. I might be looking at a massive black wolf, but in those green eyes, I still saw Derek. He tried to take a step, but his legs slid out and he hit the ground with an earth-shaking thud. I scrambled over to him as he lay there, eyes closed, flank heaving, tongue lolling. "Are you okay?" His eyes opened and he gave an awkward jerk of his muzzle, as if he was trying to nod, then his pupils rolled up and his eyes closed again. He was fine, just exhausted, like the last time when he'd been too tired even to dress before he fell asleep. I stood and started for the path, wanting to leave him in peace. I made it 2 steps before he snorted. I turned to see him lying on his belly, ready to jump up. He jerked his muzzle, telling me to come back. "I thought you'd want to be." He cut me off with a snort. It was hard for a wolf to scowl, but he managed a good glower. I took the switchblade from my jacket pocket. "I'll be fine. I'm armed." A snort. I don't care. A head jerk. Get back here. When I hesitated, he growled. Well, you've got the growling part down pat already. Must be all those years of practice. He began to rise, legs wobbly. All right, I'm coming back. I just didn't want to be in your way. A grunt. You're not. Or that's what I hoped he meant. You can understand me, can't you? I said as I returned to sit on his discarded sweatshirt. You know what I'm saying. He tried to nod, then snarled at the awkwardness of it. Not easy when you can't talk, is it? I grinned. Well, not easy for you. I could get used to it. He grumbled, but I could see relief in his eyes, like he was glad to see me smile. So I was right, wasn't I? It's still you, even in wolf form. He grunted. No sudden uncontrollable urges to go kill something. He rolled his eyes. Hey, you're the one who was worried. I paused. And I don't smell like dinner, right? I got a real look for that one. Just covering all the bases. He gave a rumbling growl, like a chuckle, and settled in, lowering his head to his front paws, gaze on me. I tried to get comfortable, but the ground was ice cold through his sweatshirt, and I was wearing only my new pajamas, a light jacket, and sneakers. Seeing me shivering, he stretched a front leg toward the sweatshirt, pawing the edge and snarling when he realized he couldn't grab it. The lack of opposable thumbs is going to take some getting used to, hey. He motioned me closer with his muzzle. When I pretended not to understand, he twisted and gingerly took the hem of the sweatshirt between his teeth, lips curled in disgust as he tugged it. Okay, I'm just trying not to crowd you. That wasn't the only reason I was uncomfortable getting too cozy with him now, but he just grunted, again seeming to say it was fine. I moved over beside him. He shifted, his torso making a partial wind block, the body heat from the change still blasting like a furnace. He grunted. Yes, that's better. Thanks. Now get some rest. I had no idea what would happen now. I doubted Derek did either. He'd been focused on getting through the change. What I did know was that this was only half the process. He had to change back, and he'd need time and rest for that. And how would it happen? Did he have to wait until his body was ready, like he did with the change to wolf? How long would that be? Hours? Days? Feeling his gaze on me, I forced a smile and pushed back my worries. It would be okay. He could change. That was the important thing. When I relaxed, he shifted closer, fur brushing my hand. I tentatively touched it, feeling the coarse top layer and soft undercoat. He leaned against my hand, as if to say it was okay, and I buried my fingers in his fur, his skin so hot from the change it was like putting my numb hands on a radiator. My cool fingers must have felt just as good, because he closed his eyes and shifted until I was leaning on him. Within minutes, he was asleep. I closed my eyes, meaning to rest for just a moment, but the next thing I knew, I was waking up, curled on my side, using Derek as a pillow. I jumped. He looked over at me. Sorry, I didn't mean. He cut me short with a growl, telling me off for apologizing, then bumped my leg, knocking me back onto his side. I lay there a moment, enjoying the warmth. He snarled a yawn, flashing canines as long as my thumb. Finally, I sat up. So, I suppose you should do something wolfy. Hunt, maybe. A grunt, the tone saying no. Run? Get some exercise. Another grunt, less decisive, more like a maybe. He pushed to his feet, wobbly, still adjusting to his new center of gravity. He gingerly moved one forepaw, then the next, one rear paw, then the other. He picked up the pace, but still slow as he circled the clearing. A snort, like he'd figured it out, and he broke into a lope, stumbled and plowed muzzle first into the undergrowth. I stifled a laugh, but not very well, and he glowered at me. Forget running. A nice, leisurely stroll might be more your speed. He snorted and turned fast. When I fell back, he gave a growling chuckle. Still can't resist throwing your weight around, can you? He lunged again. This time I stood my ground and he checked his leap at the last second, and toppled sideways. I didn't hide my laugh that time. He twisted fast, grabbed my pajama leg and wrenched, and down I went. Bully! He growled a chuckle. I fingered an imaginary tear in my pant leg. Great! I finally get some PJs and you rip them. He walked over for a better look. I tried to grab his foreleg, but he darted out of my reach and tore across the clearing. Then he stopped, looking over his shoulder as if to say, how'd I do that? He turned and tried racing across it again, but his legs tangled and he fell in a heap beside me. You're thinking too much, as usual, I said. A dismissive snort as he got to his feet. He tried running again, and didn't fall, but did more lurching than loping, his legs threatening to tangle at every step. Apparently this could take a while, so how about you practice and I'll head back to the house. He darted past me and veered to block my path. I smiled. I knew that'd work. So am I right? It's better when you act, not think. A sigh whistled out of his nostrils, condensation hanging in the frigid air. You hate that, don't you? We should keep a scorecard, see who's right more often, me or you. He rolled his eyes. Not a chance, hey? You'd never live it down if I beat you. But I am right this time. Your body knows how to move as a wolf. You just need to shut your brain off and let your muscles do their thing. He dashed at me. When I didn't move, he tore around me, circling wide, head lowered, picking up speed until he was a blur of black fur. And I laughed. I couldn't help it. It looked so amazing. To be in another form. To experience the world that way. I was happy for him. Finally, he threw on the brakes, skidding to a halt, each leg shooting out in a different direction. You're going to need to work on that part, I said. He growled and gave a head shake that I couldn't interpret until he got to his feet, muzzle lifting to catch the wind, ears swiveling forward. Someone's coming. I whispered. He grunted. SHHH, I'm listening. I listened with him, straining to hear what he did. Then came a sound I didn't need werewolf hearing to pick up, a long, eerie howl. The fur on Derek's back rose, adding inches to his already huge frame. Dog. I whispered. But I'd heard enough dogs in my life to know that wasn't what this was. Derek dashed behind me and bumped the back of my legs. Run! I raced to the path. Derek stayed behind, the thumping of his paws barely even betraying him, and I finally understood why he always moved so quietly. Predatory instinct. An instinct and a skill I lacked, and as we ran that became painfully obvious. I might be half Derek's size, but I was the one who sounded like a 200-pound beast plowing through the woods. My breath chugged like a locomotive. My feet found every stick on the path, each snap as loud as gunfire. I tried to be quieter, but that meant slower. When my pace dropped, Derek bumped me from behind, telling me not to bother, to keep moving. I could see the lights of the house ahead. Then, From somewhere between it and us came an ear-splitting whistle. I stopped. Derek did, too, in a skid that knocked me to my knees. He grunted an apology. As I rose, he'd already recovered and was in front of me now, muzzle raised to sample the wind. The breeze was coming from the side, though, and he paced, trying to catch a whiff of whoever had whistled. When he did, his body went rigid, ears back, growl bubbling up. Then he wheeled, almost slamming into me. "Who?" he answered with a snap of his jaws, catching the hem of my jacket. "Just run." I did. 21. Who were we running from? I'd seen enough horror flicks to know that Howl had come from a wolf, and there were no wild ones left in New York State. That meant werewolf. Liam and Ramon, the two who'd tried to grab Derek the other day, had said all of the state was the territory of the pack, who'd hunt and kill any trespassing werewolves. Obviously they weren't that thorough. Derek had lived here all his life. But had they finally found him? If it wasn't the pack, then who had whistled? Andrew said the Edison group didn't hire werewolves. Was he wrong? If they wanted someone to track their missing subjects, a werewolf would be the best supernatural bloodhound around. Right now, it didn't matter. Derek knew who'd whistled, and even if he couldn't tell me, his actions said we were in trouble, and all we could do was hope to outrun it. "There's a creek over there," I said, pointing. "If it's a werewolf that we're trying to lose, water will hide our trail, right?" He answered by veering that way. The creek wasn't much more than a trickle, but it was enough to swallow our trail. As we ran, it cut deeper into the earth, banks rising to small cliffs on either side. If we kept going, we might find ourselves trapped. Derek took the lead, scrambling up the creek bank with me following, soaked sneakers sliding in the dirt as I grabbed roots to pull myself up. I moved as quietly as I could, knowing any werewolf would share Derek's keen hearing. We ran along the embankment until we reached a thick patch of woods. Derek herded me into a clearing in the middle of it. He crouched in the center, his front legs stretched out, his head and tail down, trying to change back to human form. After a few minutes of straining and snarling, he gave up. "We can't stay here," I said. "If it's a werewolf." He grunted, confirming that. "Then he's eventually going to find our trail. These woods aren't that big." Another grunt. "I know. I think the house is that way." He shook his head and pointed his muzzle a little more to the left. "Okay, good," I said. "So we just need to." He went still again, nose rising, ears turning. I crouched beside him. He kept sniffing, grumbling deep in his throat, like he'd caught a scent he couldn't seem to find again. Finally, he prodded me toward the mouth of the clearing with a noise that I thought meant run, but when I shot forward, he caught the back of my jacket between his teeth. "Go slow," I whispered. Quietly. A grunt. "Yes." He slid in front of me and took a step. Then another. A cloud rolled over the moon and the forest went black. We stopped. A twig cracked to our right. Derek spun so fast he crashed into me, pushing me back as I stumbled, snapping at me when I didn't move fast enough. As I retreated into the clearing, I could make out a dark shape at the edge. At another twig crack, Derek slammed into the back of my legs, pushing and jostling me until I was at the far side of the clearing, then prodding me into the thick brush. "I can't," I whispered. He snapped and growled. "Yes, you can." I got down on all fours and pushed into the brush, hands in front of my face to clear the way. I'd gone only a few feet when I hit a tree. Thick bushes blocked either side. I twisted to tell Derek that I couldn't continue, but he'd stopped at the edge of my hole, his backside blocking the entrance. The cloud cover thinned, and a figure materialized in the path. It was another wolf, as black as Derek. It seemed to roll toward us, silent as fog, slowly and steadily drifting our way. The clouds finally passed by the moon, but the wolf was still black as night from his nose to his eyes. I noticed pale stripes along one flank. When I squinted, I saw that they were strips of missing fur, the uncovered skin pink and puckered with recent scar tissue. I'd seen those scars just a few days before. "Ramon," I whispered. Derek snarled, fur rising, tail puffing, fangs flashing. But the other wolf kept coming at us, steady and relentless. Finally, with a roar, Derek rushed at him. Ramon stopped. He didn't back up. Didn't even growl. He just stood his ground until Derek was almost on him, then feinted to the side and ran straight at me. Derek tried to stop, but he'd put too much momentum into the charge and he skidded into the brush. As Ramon barreled toward me, I scrambled to get away, but the brush was too thick. Fortunately, it was too thick for him, too, and he couldn't get any farther than Derek had, just close enough for me to smell the stink of his breath as he tried to shoulder his way deeper into the undergrowth. Then he yelped and flew back with Derek's teeth embedded in his haunch. Ramon yanked free and lunged at him. Derek ducked and tore past Ramon to block the mouth of my hiding place. For a moment, all I could see was Derek's tail. Then I glimpsed Ramon off to the side, backing up, peering around Derek, like he was assessing the situation. He lunged to the left. Derek sprang that way, snapping and snarling. Ramon feinted right. Derek blocked. Left again. Blocked again. It was like that evening in the playground when Liam kept pretending to grab for me, taunting Derek, laughing as he reacted every time. "He's teasing you," I whispered. "Trying to wear you down. Don't fall for it." Derek grunted. He tensed, like he was locking his legs. But it didn't help. Every time Ramon made a move my way, Derek jumped, snapping and growling. Finally Ramon tired of the game and ran full out at Derek. They hit with a bone-cracking thud and went down, biting and growling, grunting and yelping when fangs sank in. My hand tightened around my switchblade. I knew I should do something. Leap into the fray. Protect Derek. But I couldn't. The other day, seeing Derek and Liam fighting in human form, they'd moved too fast for me to interfere. That was slow motion compared to this, a frenzied ball of fur and fury rolling across the clearing, one indistinguishable mass of black fur and flashing fangs and spattering blood. I had to do something, because Derek had a serious handicap, me. He couldn't seem to forget I was there, and every time Ramon rolled my way, Derek stopped fighting to get between us again. I wanted to tell him to forget about me. I was fine, burrowed deep in the undergrowth and armed, and there was no sign of Ramon's partner, Liam. But I knew it wouldn't do any good. That protective instinct overrode reason. I stood, reached as high as I could, and grabbed the bottom branch of the tree behind me. My stitched arm complained, but I ignored it. I clambered up. Climbing was easy. The tough part was not looking down every time I heard a grunt or a yelp. Finally I was too high for Ramon to reach. I called to Derek, telling him I was safe. He still had to check, of course, glancing up and getting a hunk of fur ripped out of his neck. But once he saw where I was, he threw himself fully into the fight. Still, as big as Derek was, he was no match for an experienced adult werewolf. When faced with Liam, Derek had run the other way, admitting he was outclassed. There might be a streak of arrogance in Derek, but there wasn't any bravado. If he couldn't win a fight, he had no problem running. This time, though, he couldn't run. I clutched the knife and wiggled out along the branch until I was over the fighters. Speaking of bravado, I stopped, feeling a prick of guilt at even thinking of something so stupid. If I dropped onto them, I'd be lucky if I didn't get Derek killed trying to protect me. I hated cowering there like a helpless heroine. Yet I was helpless against Ramon. I didn't have superhuman strength or superhuman senses or fangs or claws or magical powers. Stop whining about what you don't have. Your brain still works, doesn't it? Under the circumstances, I wasn't too sure. Just use it. Think. I stared down at the fight, racking my brain for a plan. As I watched, I realized I could tell which one was Ramon by the scars. If I could. The scars. I leaned down as far as I dared. Derek. His side. Where he's scarred. I struggled for a way to explain without giving away the plan to Ramon, but I didn't need to say another word. Derek twisted and clamped down on Ramon's flank. Without fur for protection, Derek's teeth sank in easily. Ramon yowled. Derek wrenched his head back, ripping out a big chunk of Ramon's flank. Blood gushed. Derek pranced back out of the way and dropped the hunk of flesh. Ramon charged, but his rear leg faltered. Derek dodged around Ramon and bit his flank again. Ramon roared in pain and fury, and wheeled, tearing himself from Derek's grip. Blood spattered as he tore around fast and grabbed Derek by the scruff of the neck. They went down, Derek struggling and clawing until one of those claws scraped across Ramon's opened flank. A yelp from Ramon, and Derek was free. Derek backpedaled toward the stream bank. It was at least a 15-foot drop and I called to warn him, but he kept backing up. Ramon lunged at him, bristling and snarling. Then a whistle cut him short. Liam. Ramon checked his charge, threw back his head, and began to howl. Derek leaped on him. Ramon cut the howl short and threw Derek off, then kept advancing on him, driving him back toward Derek. The cliff. This time, his gaze swung up, meeting mine. But he didn't stop, just kept going, gaze once again locked with Ramon's. At the last second, Derek veered left, circling and hitting Ramon square in his wounded flank. Ramon sailed off his feet. Derek pounced on him. His fangs sank into that mass of shredded flesh. Ramon let out an unearthly howl of agony. Ramon managed to scramble up, his back to the cliff. Derek lunged at him. Ramon backpedaled. At the last second, he saw the looming drop and started to twist out of the way, but Derek head-butted him in that wounded flank, sending him flying over the edge of the embankment. I climbed down and ran over to Derek, poised on the bank, looking at Ramon, who was still conscious, struggling to get up, one foreleg twisted at an ugly angle. The whistle came again. Derek turned sharply, banging my legs, then prodding me with his nose, telling me to get moving. "Is it Liam?" I asked. He dipped his muzzle in a nod. As for why Liam would be in human form, I wasn't stopping to wonder. He was still a formidable threat. The only advantage was that if he wasn't a wolf, tracking us would be slower. "It came from near the house," I whispered as we ran. "We should head for the road." "Do you know where?" He answered by barreling past me. We ran for a few minutes, but I kept falling behind. He raced back to take up the rear. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I can't see and I keep tripping." He cut me off with a grunt. "I know. Just go." I took the lead, letting Derek tap the back of my legs whenever I started heading off course. Finally, I could see lights through the trees. Derek prodded me toward them and making a haluva racket, ain't ya, pup? Liam's Texas drawl echoed through the forest. Derek knocked me flying. I hit the ground hard, chin scraping the earth, dirt spraying into my mouth. I tried to rise, but Derek was standing over me. I ran my tongue over my teeth, making sure I hadn't lost any. Derek chuffed and prodded the back of my neck. I was going to interpret that as an apology, whether it was or not. Come out, wherever you are," Liam sang. Derek nudged me into a thicket so small we had to crowd in together and I got a mouthful of fur. When I tried to give him more room, he growled at me to be still. I sat down and he pressed against me, getting the rest of his bulk into the thicket, until he was practically on my lap. He lifted his head to sample the wind. It was coming from the same direction as Liam's voice, meaning he couldn't smell us. I closed my eyes to listen better. I could feel the pounding of Derek's racing heart. Mine must have been beating just as hard, because he nudged my arm until I opened my eyes and met his, dark with concern. "I'm okay," I whispered. He shifted, trying to take more weight off my legs. As he moved, my hand brushed a patch of wet fur. I drew back to see my fingers sticky with blood. "You're..." He cut me off with a grunt. "I'm okay. Now, shhh." I tried to see how badly he was hurt, but he shifted again, this time keeping me down. We sat there, silently listening. His ears swiveled, and every now and then they'd twitch, like he'd caught a noise. But instead of tensing, he began to relax. "He's moving away," I whispered. He nodded. I settled in. It was hard to be afraid for your life when there was a 200-pound wolf on your lap. It was oddly comforting. Between the heat of his body, the softness of his fur, and the beat of his heart, I found myself blinking to stay awake. "Is he gone?" I whispered. Derek shook his head. "How long should we stay?" Derek stiffened. I peered into the night, but when I glanced at Derek, he didn't have that pointer on a scent look. His head was still down. His eyes were wide, and he held himself completely still. Then I felt it. His muscles were twitching. "You're ready to change back," I whispered. He grunted, tense, worry seeping into his eyes. "No problem. It always takes a while after the first sign, right? We'll have time to get you back to the house. You can change there." He convulsed, his front legs shooting out. He collapsed on his side, all four legs going rigid, head jerking back, eyes rolling wildly. "It's all right. This is better anyway. Just let it happen." Not like he had a choice. I crawled over him, getting out of the way of those flailing claws. Crouching behind him, I rubbed his shoulders and told him he was doing fine, everything was okay. His head lowered, then flew back with a bone-cracking snap. He let out a yelp, ending in a snarl as he tried to be quiet, but the convulsions kept coming faster and a whimper escaped with each fresh spasm. When he finally stopped, everything around us stayed silent. But I knew Liam had heard. I leaned over Derek, whispering encouragement, hoping to block any sound of Liam, keep him from panicking. Soon, though, Derek's head shot up and I knew Liam was coming. Derek was well into his change now, his muzzle shortening, ears moving to the sides, hair growing as his fur retracted. I leaned down to his ear. "Just keep going, okay? I'll look after it." He stiffened and made a noise that I knew was a no. I rose. He tried to do the same, only to be hit with another convulsion. "I'll be okay," I said, pulling out my knife. "I won't do anything stupid." "You're almost finished. I'll distract him until you are." "No," his voice was garbled, guttural. I turned to go. He grabbed for my leg, but his fingers were still knobby stubs and I easily pulled away. Without looking back, I ran from the thicket. 22. I ran, getting as far from Derek as I could. Finally I saw the figure of a tall, lean man with light hair, limping through the forest, cane in one hand. Liam. The limp explained why he wasn't in wolf form. If changing was as painful as it seemed, I could only imagine how bad it would be if you were injured. That injury also meant he had a grudge to settle with me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my galloping heart. It didn't work. Too bad. I couldn't let him get close enough to see or hear Derek changing. I ran as close as I dared, then pulled up short in his path. He stopped and smiled. "Hello there, cutie," he drawled. "I thought I smelled you. How's the leg?" His grin turned a little less friendly, more bared teeth than smile. "Hurts like a son of. Sorry about that." "I bet you are." He stepped closer. I stepped back. "Don't worry," he said. "I forgive you for the leg. I like a little spirit in my fillies." His look sent a shiver through me. "Makes them more fun to break. Now where's that big ox of a boyfriend?" He raised his voice. "This is a coward's ploy, pup, sending the girl out to distract me." "About what I'd expect, though, considering how fast you ran away last time." He listened, seeing if the taunt would bring Derek out. "He's busy," I said. "With Ramon. He figured I could handle you." Liam threw back his head and laughed. "You do have spunk. We're gonna have fun, just as soon as I take care of your boyfriend." He moved toward me. I sidestepped, leading him away. "You wanna play chase, cutie? I'm real good at it. How about we let your boyfriend and Ramon have their fun while we have ours?" And something buzzed. Liam sighed, reached into his pocket, and flipped open a cell phone. "Kinda busy," he said. He paused, listening. I could hear a man's voice on the other end and thought I caught Derek's name. Yeah. You keep calling, we're never going to catch him for you." If Liam said we, then it wasn't Ramon phoning. Someone from the pack? Had Liam already promised them Derek and now had to deliver? "Quit your moaning," Liam said. "I told you we'll have him by sunrise. We just hit a minor complication. There's a reason he came out into the woods tonight messing around with his girlfriend." Liam looked at me. "Cute little thing. Dyed black hair. Big blue eyes." He paused. "Chloe?" "Yeah, she looks like a Chloe." "The Edison Group?" "Had to be." Right now, though, all I cared about was that whoever it was, he was keeping Liam occupied, giving Derek time to change. "Well, see, that's the problem," Liam continued. "We can't seem to separate the two. So, taking him in might mean taking her, too." He paused, listening. "Of course, we'll try to leave her alone, but..." Another pause. "I understand. Getting rid of the pup one way or another is your main concern. So you accept the risk of collateral damage." As he listened to the answer, he smiled at me. "Absolutely. If we can't separate them, you won't need to worry about the girl again. I'll make sure of that. Now, if you have anything else to say, how about texting me? I'm kinda busy." He hung up. Seems some people consider you expendable, Chloe. Who? He lowered his voice to a mock whisper. Bad people. It's a hard lesson, but the world is full of. A distant cry stopped him short. He turned in the direction of the thicket. Speaking of bad people, seems someone's been telling me fibs. Your boyfriend's not playing with Ramon, is he? I stepped in front of him. He started to brush past me. I know you're eager to have some fun, but I need to get your boyfriend out of the way first. Don't you worry, though. It sounds like he's changing, and, if so, this is going to be quick. I jumped in his way again. His smile turned brittle. Save that spunk for later. Right now, it's only going to me off, and you don't want to do that. I let him pass but stayed on his heels, struggling to think up a plan. I could hear Derek moaning. The change might have come on fast, but it was taking time to finish. Derek's defenseless. If Liam finds him like that, he'll kill him. I know. Then do something. I took out my switchblade, opened it, and crept forward, closing the gap between us, gaze fixed on Liam's back. He glanced over his shoulder. I hid the knife. He stopped. How about you walk in front of me, he said. I'm okay. His face hardened. Get in front of me, where I can see you. As I passed him, my gaze went to his cane. Like Ramon, he was wounded. Use that. Why, you said you'd take Derek to the P-Pack, I fake stammered. That's still the plan, right? He just waved me on, gaze locked on the distant spot where Derek was. Please Don T. I lunged and grabbed for the cane, but he whisked it out of reach, then swung it around, hitting me in the back so hard it knocked the air from my lungs and the ground from under my feet. I hit the dirt, gasping, injured arm burning. I lifted my head, struggling to focus as Liam continued bearing down on Derek's thicket. Every breath felt like a white-hot knife stabbing my lungs. Do something. Like what? I was powerless. No. I wasn't powerless. There was something I could do. The thought of it made bile rise in my throat, but it was nothing compared to what I felt at the thought of Liam finding Derek before he finished his change. I had to buy him more time. I closed my eyes and concentrated, pushing past the warning alarms. I poured everything I had into the summons, and nothing happened. All those genetically enhanced powers and, when I needed them, they failed. Then you're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. I tried to rise. Pain ripped through me and the forest seemed to tilt, my gorge rising again. I gritted my teeth and crawled to a nearby fallen branch. I wrapped my fingers around it, steeled myself against the pain, then pushed myself up. Once I was standing, I ran at Liam. He wheeled out of my path, but I managed to swing and hit his thigh in the same place I'd stabbed him 3 nights ago. He howled and staggered. I hit him again. He went down. As he fell, he grabbed for me, but I danced back, stick raised. When he tried to get up, I swung again. This time, he caught the stick and whipped me off my feet. I let go of the branch, but I was already sailing through the air. I crashed down a few feet from him, then scrambled out of the way as he twisted to grab me. I managed to get to my feet. He started pushing up, then stopped, staring at something behind me. Please let it be Derek. I turned to see a partially decomposed rabbit pulling its mangled body toward me. Its ears were shredded strips of leathery skin. Its nose was a crater, lips gone, big front teeth protruding. Its eyes were shriveled raisins. The back half of its body was flattened and twisted, hind legs to one side as it dragged itself forward. "Stop," I said, my voice eerily calm. The rabbit stopped. I turned to Liam. He looked at me, face screwed up. Slowly, he rose, still staring at me. "Forward," I said. The rabbit lurched toward Liam. He stumbled back. I got to my feet. The rabbit stood beside me, gnashing its teeth. I mentally commanded it to advance on Liam. It hesitated, then it swung its head in his direction and started toward him. He let out a string of curses, backing away slowly. Then a growl sounded behind him. Liam turned. A dark shape moved between the trees, hidden in their shadows. I could see only the outline, the pointed ears, bushy tail, and long muzzle. Had Derek reverted to wolf? As the beast crept forward, though, I realized it was barely half Derek's size. It stopped under a tree, almost hidden there, only its teeth visible, lips pulled back, growl vibrating. When it stepped into the moonlight, I braced myself for a hideous undead beast. But it was only an ordinary, living dog, probably from a nearby home. The dog advanced on Liam, still growling. Werewolves and dogs didn't mix, I knew that from Derek. Liam locked gazes with it and gave a growl of his own. The dog kept coming at him. "Shoo, pooch." Liam drew back his foot to kick it. Then he caught sight of the rabbit drawing alongside him. He backed away. The undergrowth behind him erupted in a flurry of breaking twigs and squeals. I couldn't see what it was, but Liam let out an oath, almost backing into the snarling dog. The dog lunged. Liam kicked it. As it flew back, moonlight caught the dog's flank, and I saw a hole the size of my fist, squirming with maggots. Liam saw it, too, and he cursed and backed away. The dog threw itself at him. Liam swerved out of its path. "Stop," I said. The dog did. It stood there, teeth bared, eyes blazing, every hair on end, growling at Liam. The rabbit lurched toward him. He kicked it, and it flew into the undergrowth, only to come back out again. Something else came out with it, some kind of rodent, mostly skeleton, rattling and gnashing its tiny teeth. "Stop," I said. They did. Liam looked at me. "Yes, they're dead," I said. "Yes, I control them. And you can't kill them. You can try, but you can't." "Well, then, I guess I'm going to have to fight the one I can kill." He charged at me. I commanded the dog to attack, but my brain stuttered, seeing Liam bearing down on me. I dove to the side. He grabbed my pajama leg and yanked. I fell onto my stomach, scrabbling to get up, fingers digging into the ground, nails tearing. I wrenched and his grip slid to my foot. I gave a tremendous heave and flung myself forward, leaving him with my sneaker. As I scrambled to my feet, I heard a smack. I spun to see Derek in human form on Liam's back. Liam bucked and threw him off. Derek grabbed him, and they went down fighting. The dog raced toward the two. I commanded it to be still, and it slid to a stop, snarling and straining like a rabid dog on a chain. I closed my eyes and gave it another order to leave its body. I kept releasing it and the other spirits, desperately trying to ignore the grunts and gasps of the fight. When I opened my eyes, the animals had collapsed, their souls freed. Liam and Derek rolled on the ground, locked in combat, Liam's hands in Derek's hair, trying to yank his head back, Derek's hands around Liam's neck, neither one able to get the grip they needed to throw the other off. I yanked out my switchblade as I raced forward. I hit the button, and felt the blade sink into my palm. I let go. The knife fell into the undergrowth. I dropped to my knees, digging for it. A crack like the snap of a tree branch. I shot up. Derek lay on his back, Liam over him, Derek's hands still around his neck. Both had gone still. Derek stared up, wide-eyed. Liam's eyes were just as wide, but they saw nothing, fixed in an empty look of final shock. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.